Hi, Zach. Great to see you again. And we're wanting to discuss the connections between the two courses that we've been building. So do you want to say a bit about how you see your course and sell your course? Why should people now, they've been in our course for a while, why should they be seeing your course as well?
Well, hi, David. It's nice to see you as well, and nice to talk to you. We have several principal components of the course that Trilateral has built. And so first of all, we have fairness and transparency, which all the different courses are focused on that. We have fairness and transparency categorized into intermediate and expert, which I believe the other courses do as well with their particular topics. And we have tried to approach both topics from a somewhat of a comprehensive perspective. And so what we do for each of those categories, so for fairness, intermediate and expert, and for transparency, intermediate and expert, we first delve quite deeply into the philosophical concepts that underpin the discussions around those topics. And so we have several modules, couple modules, I should say, on the philosophical concepts underpinning fairness in AI, as well as underpinning transparency in AI. We also have a module on the legal interpretations of fairness and bias. And we have then we have modules then focused on the technical interpretations of fairness and bias, the technical concepts that arise with transparency, explainability, and how a developer could approach from a technical perspective trying to achieve fairness and transparency each. And what we try to do is we try to anchor these discussions in practical use cases. And this comes out of a lot of the practical experience that we have at Trilateral research, where we have implemented the steps that we're discussing in this course, where we've implemented the kind of high-level theoretical concepts and put them into practical steps, and where we have our data scientists and data engineers have actually taken the steps to build applications or to assess algorithms that they describe in the more technically oriented parts of the course. And so I think the learners will be able to experience all of that if they were to go from A to Z throughout the course, or they could pick and choose those aspects of our course that they felt was most relevant to their particular jobs or to what they were interested in.
Absolutely, and everything you've described are things which sort of really resonate with the course we try to develop as well. But knowing your course and seeing your content, you've really gone into depth. We've flitted about here and there. We've had the philosophers come in and do little bits on this and that, but you guys have really got the depth in what you're doing. And so we might have a little bit more breadth than you in what we're covering, but you guys have really got the depth. So I hope this will be a good sort of complementary course, if you want, a complementary course, sorry, and that we can actually sort of maybe have some of our people go from our course to yours, and maybe people who want something a bit lighter, you might also bring them to our course as well.
Well, and I think that's a great way to describe it, because I think, sometimes what one wants is a general overview, and sometimes one has more time or has the interest or the desire to delve more deeply. And so exactly. I think the courses really do complement each other. And I think, the learners will have the opportunity to be able to select not only which modules or which courses they want to go into, but they can also do both. And so they can get the overview, then delve deeper, then come back to the overview. Sometimes when courses go into quite a lot of detail, it's hard to retain all of that information. So then the overview might serve as a reminder for some of those more details. Some of the details that we provide might not be relevant for a particular for a particular learner, they might be really interested more in the technical aspects that we have and less interested in the philosophical concepts. We have attempted to include both of those approaches because that's how we do things at the company, at Trilateral Research. We take a socio-tech approach to these problems. And so we have people, for example, my background is in philosophy, and I which is one of the reasons that appears in the course. I find it interesting, and I find that it is interesting for learners as well. But of course, those concepts and the outcomes of that knowledge ought to be applicable and practical in some way. And so that's where then the technical work comes in. But we also have particular use cases. We have use cases on a social media scraping tool, a use case on building an algorithm to combat child exploitation for police. And those might be useful, and we hope they're useful for all of the learners, but they also might not be. And so that's why I think the two courses really do complement each other, and learners can have the option to go back and forth and to revisit both courses and both offerings.
Absolutely, and even our case studies complement each other. You know, we went for the sort of some of the things related to Apple and Amazon and some of their some of the scandals that came out around that. We had another one on the Compass data. We had a protein folding example case study. And so again, it's sort of, I feel that this richness that comes out again in the case studies, I think from what I've seen, our approach to them has been quite different. But again, it's that diversity which can be so rich. So it's been really great talking about this, and hopefully we'll have more crossover, not just through sort of people in the courses, but you know, we have a lot of similarities in the way we approach it. So I hope we'll be continuing to interact beyond.
I hope so as well. And I think, David, that's a really interesting point, because you know, even when there's some overlap with some of the use cases, these are use cases where you mentioned the Compass use case and the Amazon use case, and these are cases that they are often cited because either the impact was so significant on individuals, and especially vulnerable individuals, and especially in the Amazon case, where the ability to avoid that occurring in retrospect seems so obvious.
Yes.
And it's exactly that sort of, you know, we want to avoid those problems moving forward, especially when the solutions are so obvious or so easy to avoid, when it comes to just understanding that a data set might be biased and that historical data reflects biases from a society that has prejudices embedded in it. And so I think, you know, it's really important for the learner to have then those cases presented from different perspectives and in several ways, to really understand how important the impact of those cases was, the danger of those cases occurring again, and yet also the solutions that we can provide to avoid those sorts of situations in the future.
And this is exactly the sort of approach we've taken in the course, which is where I think we're the same. It's sort of, these cases didn't come because people were maliciously aiming to do them. They came because they didn't know that they had to be more careful. Now we know that. You know, can we empower people to be more careful? And if they are more careful, well, actually, in the long run, can we legislate for that? And this is where the philosophical angle really comes in, because the legislation's coming in. And you talk about that in your course, and we mention this in our course as well. You know, the legislation, which isn't always there now, but will be in a few years' time, will mean that if you don't do this responsibly, it's going to be illegal in the future. And that's really, so we're helping people to prepare and protect themselves for, you know, the future. And
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think, and it's an interesting time right now, because we finally have regulations with an ethical content entering into force. And, you know, in the past, obviously with the GDPR, the focus was on data protection, extremely important, data protection and privacy. But with the widespread use of AI, we have all of these ethical issues which also have to be addressed. so it's quite welcome that we now have a lot new regulations coming down the pike for to focus on ethical content related to AI, whether it's the AI Act in the EU, or the Algorithmic Transparency Reporting Standard in the UK, and many others. And this is really important because not only is it important to, as we've already said, to try to protect vulnerable populations and others from a significant impact on their well-being and their rights, but this is really important for developers who will be learners in our course, to see that not only the significant impact that their work can have, right? Because you might just go along with your work and say, well, I'm doing this aspect of building a model for this tool. I'm not too worried about how it's going to be used or how it could be misused. But developers do have that responsibility to think about that, and now there will be legal repercussions for not thinking about that. And so I think that's a really welcome development in the landscape, and so really important for the learners of our course to pay attention to, and to focus on, and to understand how they can build those ethical principles into their design and their development of models and tools. And I think, as you said, it's not always that difficult, right? I mean, there are easy or not overly complex ways to avoid some of the really significant and catastrophic examples of unethical tools that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, I'm afraid the way that we put in our course is it's easy to do things to become more responsible. Actually being ethical, that's really hard, because there's a lot of unknowns still out there. And
there are. That's right.
And so yes, it's easy to do better, but actually how far we've got to go, I don't really know that. There's a lot of, there are certain cases where we do know, but there's other cases where there's still unknowns out there.
I think that point is, I see that as an ethical stance, right? Which is acknowledging what we don't know. And that's why, we wanted to include the philosophical elements to our course as well, because what does philosophy do best? It doesn't necessarily give answers, but it does ask questions, and it asks the kinds of questions that we need to be asking. And it helps us recognize when we don't have knowledge about a certain area, and that in itself can actually be, and I think it is, an ethical stance to admit and recognize, hey, I don't know all the ways that this AI tool might be misused, or I don't understand all of the different aspects of discrimination and vulnerable populations and how they experience the world. But just that statement and that recognition is itself already progress. And I think, if learners come out of our courses with that sort of acknowledgement, that's progress, I think.
And from a societal perspective, it means that we could be putting resources towards filling those gaps. And this is sort of where, there's real hope. I mean, AI is going to be a force in the future without any doubt. We're already seeing its implications. Good things are happening, but making sure that they're more good than bad, that's the responsible. That's what we're aiming for.
That's right. That's right. And that's because AI tools are not inherently good or bad, and they can be used for both purposes, and they can do a great deal of good. We've seen, AI tools being able to diagnose certain kinds of cancer better than human doctors, right? And that's an amazing accomplishment. And yet we've also seen AI tools being used to further entrench societal injustices, like the arresting of minority populations. And so it's
the
really
Dutch
about
example. The Dutch scandal is the one that always scares us. And what happened there? Oh, it was sort of the tools used wrong have huge societal impact.
And I think for the learners of the courses, I think there's two lessons here. One is what could have been done in the development phase to avoid, to identify that sort of bias that was baked into the model, but also to always have an eye open for operational use of the tool. And as you pointed out, wrongdoing is very rarely out of malice. It's usually out of thoughtlessness. And these, the Dutch example is a great one where, or even the Amazon example of building a model based on the hiring of men.
Absolutely.
It was basically thoughtless. And thoughtlessness is something that we can do something about, whether it's through education or through policy. You're right.
Absolutely. This has been wonderful. It's been great talking to you, and really excited that these courses are going to get out there now.
It's been a pleasure, David. And I agree. I think the courses complement each other really wonderfully, and I'm happy for the learners, because I think they're really going to get a lot out of our two courses, but really all of the courses at Turing, and really be able to learn a lot and move forward in what you said, which is AI being such a powerful movement into the future, but being able to do it in a responsible and even hopefully ethical way.
Great. Thanks again. Cheers.
Cheers.